Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode Take This Week. My name is Aplak. Hope all of you are keeping well. So, today I want to talk about something which is almost invisible, yet a very potent force which is shaping our digital economy. You may be wondering what it is. Something that I like to believe very few people talk about. I'm going to talk about today something what we call as defaults. Not features, not pricing, not even innovation. Defaults. Must be you must be wondering what is Upload talking about today, right? What do you mean by defaults and what is there to talk about it? So let me start with a simple question. When was the last time you changed your default browser, right? Your default search engine, or even your phone's notification settings? Most of us don't remember. At least I don't. And that is exactly the point. You know, So because in today's digital world, the most powerful decisions are the ones we never consciously make. So today's discussion is all about it. So we often say that technology, has given us so much more choice, more apps, more platforms, more alternatives than ever before, right? But something subtle has changed along with that as well, right? The number of choices may have exploded. I agree, but the number of decisions we actively make has kind of collapsed. Think of it. Why? One of the reasons probably is because of defaults. The apps that come pre-installed, the settings that are pre-selected, the options that require a lot of effort seemingly to change. In fact, multiple behavioral studies show that 80% of users, stick with default settings even when better alternatives exist. Not because they've evaluated everything. On the absolute contrary, because they haven't, right? So let's understand the psychology behind default and why it works and why are we talking about it. Defaults work because they align perfectly with how our brain functions. We avoid conflict, we avoid effort, so we are fearful of making the wrong decisions. We trust that's already chosen. So in fact there's a term for this also. It's I think called as the status quo bias, right? So if something is already set, as we call it the factory setting, and we feel the OEMs know it best, so we assume it's good enough, and sometimes even recommend it. And this is why a single design decision, a, a pre-ticked box, a default toggle, a pre-selected app can influence behavior at massive scale. I'll give you an example outside the tech industry, right? And this is from the healthcare sector. So in countries like Austria and Belgium, citizens are automatically enrolled as organ donors unless they opt out. Do you know the consent rates there? Exceeding 90%. The same, thing when you apply in Germany, where there's an in-opt system, right? So it is not automatically enrolled. Do you know what the rate is? The consent rate is less than 12%. And you all know Austria, Belgium, Germany, they're all equally economically powerful. So there's no difference there. It is just about the toggle, right? The difference is the default, as I would say, right? So understand that there's much more to psychology, and it actually leads to a lot of power because understand default are not just about a UX choice. They are one of the most powerful business strategies in tech. Have you ever thought of it? I mean, probably before this episode, you wouldn't have given so much thought to defaults as a concept, right? I'll give you an example, another example from the tech world. Take Google, for example. It pays reportedly close to $18 billion annually to Apple just to remain as the default search engine on iPhones. Think about it, 18 billion just for a setting. Why would a company spend this kind of money? It's a lot of money, right? But they know something very simple. You know, when you are a default, you don't win. You don't have to win every day. You're not trying to vie for the customer's attention. You start with them. You know, and this is where defaults begin to influence an entire decision ecosystem. Right? Because in digital ecosystems, usage drives improvement. We know how it works, right? More users, more data, better algorithms, better experience. But if users don't switch, competition would never get that data, which kind of means they never improve fast enough, which means users never switch. It's cyclical, right? So it's a reinforcing cycle, and we've seen this play out really clearly. I'll give you another example from the world of technology. When Microsoft started bundling, say, Microsoft Teams into Office 365, it rapidly became one of the most widely used workplace collaboration tools. It wasn't necessarily because it was dramatically superior to existing solutions like Slack at the time, but because it already was integrated into the ecosystem companies was using every day. It just made it easier and simpler, right? So ecosystem itself became the biggest advantage. So with the power of default, the competition don't struggle to win. They struggle to even compete. Think of it. So in a world where we talk about product innovation, how do I view the customer and all of that, default makes it in real conversation a little uncomfortable because we often assume that companies win because they have better products, like I said, right? But increasingly, as we can see through this podcast, they win many a times because they control distribution at the moment of decision. Think of it. This is what I was been talking about, right? And defaults are the most effective way to do that. Because when a product becomes a default, it doesn't just compete, it pre-decides for you. So here's a real question. Is this a competition or is it monopolization and redesign for a digital age? Earlier power came from controlling supply or pricing. Now power comes from controlling choice architecture. It doesn't block competition, it makes them simply invisible. And that's far more subtle, yet far more powerful, right? So essentially what I'm trying to talk about is, because on the surface, everything looks fair. You can switch, you can choose, you can exploit it. But in reality, most of us don't. I don't, right? We've already seen examples of regulators step in when digital behavior starts creating broader societal way, right? Defaults may not look as dramatic, but their influence is far deeper because they shape behavior quietly and at scale every single day. So the real role of regulation may not be to remove defaults. I'm not suggesting that, but to ensure that users are given a real choice and not an invisible choice and not the illusion of one. Because the most powerful product today are not the ones you choose. Yeah, and this is where I would like to conclude. They're the ones you never question. I think it made me think a lot. Hope it does the same to you as well. Have a great week ahead. Bye for now.